Everyone is talking about Oprah's new book where she shares why she decided to go on Ozempic, but almost no one is mentioning the things that she's not telling us. So today I'm going to share her main 3 arguments for using Ozempic and why, based on my experience in losing 45 pounds, I think she's wrong. So Oprah's first main argument is that we have a biological set point. This is the premise that we have, quote, a thermostat that basically fights to keep us at a specific weight. So for example, Oprah mentioned several times that she believes her biological set point was 211 pounds, and that no matter how much dieting or how much exercise she did, no matter how much willpower she had, she always ended up back at that weight because her body is trying to keep her at that set point. Now, if this were true, then why is it that 50 years ago or 100 years ago, there were far less overweight people? Even Oprah's doctor admitted in one of her interviews why this was. Take a look.
So if we had been born 100 years ago, all of us would likely weigh less. So somebody born
Why?
100, well, because of our obesogenic environment. So an environment that is filled with ultra-processed food, lack of physical activity, lots of stress, lack of sleep, all these things. But if we had been born, let's say somebody was supposed to be normal weight 100 years ago. Fast forward to right now, they may actually have overweight or be overweight. And that's because our environment changed much more quickly than our biology.
So as you can see in that video clip, her doctor basically refuted the claim that we have a biological set point. Because her main reason why people 50 or 100 years ago weren't overweight is because of the environment. The environment was different. They didn't have the ultra-processed foods they have now. It was actually considered shameful to be overweight or to overeat back then. My grandmother grew up in that generation, and even she had very negative viewpoints against people who were overweight. So if we have a biological set point, wouldn't it make sense that there would be the same percentage of overweight people 50 years ago that we have now? But it does make sense that it would be the ultra-processed foods and the foods that are high in carbs and higher sugar that are actually causing the main problem with people being overweight today. This was definitely the case for me. 2 years ago, before I lost 45 pounds, I was eating a standard American diet with very ultra-processed foods. I was eating high carbs, high sugar, and because of that, my insulin was constantly rising. I was getting glucose spikes, and it was very difficult for me to stay on a lower calorie eating plan so that I could lose weight. Once I started a low carb lifestyle and started taking those high carb and high sugar foods out of my diet, I started to have more appetite control. I had less cravings in the afternoon. I stopped craving sugar and high carb foods more, and it was a lot easier for me to sustain a weight loss program. And eventually, over the past 2 years of doing that, I've been able to lose the 45 pounds. Now, in reality, it's not a biological set point. It's actually something some people call a settling point, which is basically where you are comfortable. It's where you have established your habits. So for example, with Oprah, she said her set point was 211 pounds. Well, the reason she was 211 pounds and the reason I was 175 pounds is because, in the words of my weight loss coach and mentor, Trainer Joe, she was eating enough for a 200-pound person. Once she decided to eat for a 150-pound person, then she would eventually be at that weight. Now, the problem with that, and the reason why not everybody does it, is because it's not comfortable. We have set up our habits of how much we eat and the type of foods that we eat over maybe 20, 30, 50 years, and it does take a lot of effort to break those habits or to change them. But we can due to neuroplasticity. That is the ability for us to change our habits that are deeply ingrained in our brain pathways. Part of the process is learning how to be a little bit uncomfortable. The reason why we were overweight is because the amount of food that we were eating and the type of food that we were eating was very comfortable for us. We felt very satisfied. It was enough to make us feel full. But when we have to drop our calories, things start to get uncomfortable. We feel like it's not enough food. So for instance, when I look at the meals I eat now at 130 pounds, they are much smaller than what they used to be. And truthfully, when I look at that, I usually think this does not look like enough food. And after I'm done eating it, I usually think that did not feel like enough food. But I know that it is because that's what helps me maintain my weight loss. And truthfully, if I feel for hunger and fullness after I have that smaller meal, it's not that I'm hungry. I just simply want more food. Now, one of the biggest problems I have with the biological set point is that it's just so depressing. If I have absolutely no control over what weight I can be, meaning my body is going to force me to be at the weight I don't want to be at, well, that's a bummer. I'd rather feel like I can control my own destiny, like I have control over some of the outcomes in my life. And actually, I do believe that. But that is another thought habit that you have to practice and build up. We believe what we tell ourselves. And if we truly believe that we don't have the power or the control within ourselves to be able to reach our goal, then we won't. Now, the second argument Oprah gave was that obesity is a disease.
The good news for you, the transformative news, was that if it's a disease,
it's not my fault.
It's not my fault.
It's not my fault, Jane. It's not my fault.
Now, if we're going to talk about this, we have to actually define what the word disease means. To me, disease means that you have absolutely no control, no matter what kind of lifestyle changes you make or what you do, you are not going to be able to do anything about being obese or overweight. The idea that obesity was a disease was a relief to Oprah because she was experiencing a lot of guilt. And it relieved her guilt when she finally thought, well, this isn't my fault. But the problem with that is it completely takes away your locus of control. The locus of control can either be internal or external. Internal means that I believe that I have a lot of control over what happens in my life. I am responsible for my choices, and my choices will help me reach the outcomes that I want. I won't ever have complete control of the outcomes because there are always outside forces that can keep us from reaching our goals, but we can definitely make progress toward them. An external locus of control is the belief that everything and everyone around me is in control of what happens to me. And I personally choose to believe that I actually have a lot more control over my life than other people do. So the problem with believing that obesity is a disease is that it also removes any incentive for you to try to change. If you really believe that you have no control, then you won't put the effort in to actually reach your goal. If that were true, then I wouldn't have been able to lose my weight and keep it off for the last 2 years. Now, Oprah believes that if you have obesity, which is the disease, then that is actually what causes the overeating, when actually it's the opposite. Overeating causes obesity. Now, this seems kind of like a duh moment. Like most of us get that if we overeat, we're going to be obese, right? There's a direct correlation. So the fact that she's kind of switching that around is just rather mind-boggling. Sometimes the frustration of trying to lose weight over so many years and having failed at it so many times, it is really tempting to quit and try to find some other reason why it's just not working. I believe, however, that overeating is actually a result of emotional eating. I am very guilty of this. I have dealt with emotional eating my entire life. It's the main way that I cope with stress. I don't go to alcohol. I don't go to drugs. The most acceptable coping mechanism out there is to overeat, and I believe that's why most people tend to overeat to cope with their stress rather than do drugs and alcohol. But the reality is it's something that's always going to be a part of me, and I accept that. And so literally on a day-by-day basis, I have to deal with thoughts that pop up because every one of us has to deal with the issues of life that just are going to come up no matter what. Sometimes it's not getting enough sleep. Sometimes it's having a really stressful work day or maybe a conflict with somebody. It could be that we just have foods in the house that aren't on our plan and that are tempting us too much, and it's making it hard for us to say no. And so that's where we need to realize that we cannot rely on willpower. If you rely on willpower, you will fail every time. So one of the things that I have done that's helped me succeed in my weight loss journey is that I get all foods out of the house that are not on my plan. And I've been lucky that I have a family that's supportive to come alongside me and participate with me in this. So for the most part, we don't have foods in the house that would be a trigger or a temptation for me. And I also have a specific cupboard where I keep all of the specific snacks and low sugar treats or anything that fits within my plan. And that makes it very easy for me to follow. Now, her third argument is that she was experiencing a lot of food noise.
But here's the thing.
Yes.
Here's the thing. The moment I took the first GLP-1, I mean, like the next day, the food noise subsided. And I thought, what the living hell is going on here? because all these years, I always thought you all were just stronger.
So the way that you have to deal with emotional eating is one, accept that it's going to be a part of your daily life. It is going to come up whenever the stresses of life come around. And we have to be proactive when it does come up. So one of the things we can do is we can learn stress management techniques. Sometimes if I start to feel some stress come up or some anxiety, I will start to do some deep breathing and relaxation exercises. I might get up and go do something else to get my mind off of whatever it was I was thinking about. Or I might just go grab a piece of gum just to keep my mouth busy. Usually after a couple of minutes, if I don't give in to that temptation, the food noise will eventually go away. Now, the reason why people who go on Ozempic do not have that food noise is because the Ozempic acts as a natural appetite suppressant. And anytime we feel full or satisfied, we typically aren't going to be experiencing that food noise or thoughts about food. But the problem is there's a lot of downsides to taking Ozempic. For example, what happens when you have to go off of it for some reason? So you lose a lot of weight, you get down to your goal weight like Oprah did. She even admitted that once she went off the Ozempic, she started to see her weight go back up again. And that is because she wasn't practicing the habits to be able to maintain the weight that she had lost. So if you're only going to rely on Ozempic, but you're not going to instill any habit changes along the way, it's going to be very difficult to be able to come off the Ozempic without gaining weight. I have seen different friends go through this repeatedly. And the only solution really is you're going to have to learn how to lose the weight and maintain it without relying on Ozempic. That's the only way I know of to learn the habits you need to learn to be able to stay on your plan, lose your weight, and then get back on track if you start to gain it. I've had to practice multiple times over the last 2 years losing weight that I had gained back after going off track for a little while. I used to not be able to do that, but now I've been practicing it so much that it is so much easier. I know exactly what I need to do every time to be able to get that extra weight off. For example, over the holidays, I gained 5 pounds over a 4-week period. And so for these last 2 weeks, I've been back on my plan, bringing down that weight slowly. And as of today, I lost that 5 pounds. So another problem with relying on Ozempic is maybe for Oprah, she can afford to be on Ozempic long term, but Ozempic is very expensive and a lot of people can't afford to stay on it forever. Plus, there really hasn't been enough research done yet to show how safe or what the long-term side effects are on Ozempic. And even if you aren't on it long-term, there are still a lot of side effects that people experience, and sometimes they have to go off of it because they're having some serious gastrointestinal problems and they just can't stay on it anymore. And then once they go off, if they haven't built up those habits to lose or maintain their weight, then they're going to gain that weight back. And I think probably the biggest problem about it is every time you lose weight, you are losing muscle. And every time you gain it back, you're gaining back primarily fat. So each time you lose weight, you are changing the ratio of muscle to fat in your body, and you're making it harder to lose weight again and to keep your weight off, because every time you lose muscle, you are slowing down your basal metabolic rate, making it that much harder the next time to lose it. Well, now that I've explained my opposing view to Oprah's 3 main arguments, if you're curious about how I lost 45 pounds over the last 2 years and have maintained it, I have a video right here where I walk through in detail about how I lost it.